It's Paul Marsh, and I'm delighted to say that I've been joined by Emily McGrath, who is the Senior Cardiac Nurse for British Heart Foundation, and Sarah and James Edmonds. How are you all?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Sarah, James, if it's okay, I'm going to start with you because your story is frightening, if I'm completely honest. Sarah, you had a sudden cardiac arrest and you collapsed in 2020. You were 31 at the time, which just nobody would expect, right? That is just completely unheard of. And James, you did CPR for 20 minutes until the paramedics arrived. I can't even imagine how scary that was.
Sure, I don't think I would necessarily say it was scary because in the time I didn't really realise how serious the situation was that we were actually in, however silly that sounds, given that I was giving CPR. But it was definitely based on intuition. It just felt like the right thing to do. And I didn't really realise how serious the situation actually was until the paramedics had arrived. And in the moment, I just did what I thought was the right thing. So it wasn't scary. I wasn't quite in the right state of mind to worry about that sort of thing, I suppose.
Had you done any kind of CPR training or any first aid courses beforehand?
No, absolutely nothing really, which I must admit I really regret saying now because given the facilities that are available on the British Heart Foundation website and through your mobile phone, the training is absolutely brilliant, really easy to do, takes about 15 minutes. So I would have felt much more confident in the moment had I actually done that training. And indeed, when I was speaking to the doctors afterwards, I had to ask them quite a few times to reassure myself that actually I had done everything I could have done, and really it would have been much nicer to know that without having to ask, I suppose. But I was just acting on instinct. There's only one thing I ever remember actually being told, which was that you need to be really forceful, probably more so than you're actually comfortable with when administering CPR. So I knew at that moment that I wasn't going to fail because of that. So really, thank God wherever I heard that from, I've got no idea, but it was probably the most important bit of information that I remembered at that moment, I suppose.
Is it literally just bits and pieces that you've seen on TV and films and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, and actually, it's comical now when you watch it on TV. Not only are these things confused with a heart attack, but also you watch people doing it on TV, and it's so light the way that it's being shown. You just, as I say, it's slightly stupid to view, and really should be a more accurate representation given in that type of thing, I think.
Yeah, I've done a few different courses, and they do say it's quite common to break ribs during CPR, and it's more or less ribs heal, so get on with it.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I think James pretty much broke every single one of my ribs, but they all healed fine. Whereas, 20 minutes of my brain getting oxygen, that would be a whole different story than a few broken ribs.
Sarah, do you remember anything? Do you know, was there any sort of lead up to it? Do you remember anything at all?
So there definitely wasn't any lead up, like very healthy, kind of, running regularly and very active. So no health prior health conditions. What I remember is our daughter Arabella was 4 at the time, so yeah, 4 years ago. And she just called out for me in the night, which I'm like any parent will be quite common. I don't know whether she had a bad dream or whether she just wanted some, I don't know. But yeah, so I remember jumping out of bed and then kind of going into her bedroom. And then I kind of remember a shortness of breath. I think that's what it really felt like, but only like a second. And then I think the next thing, James found me collapsed on the bottom of her bed. Um, so she thought I was playing a game with her. She thought I was playing like hide and seek or whatever. So she kind of was giggling, which kind of alerted James because I'm not going to be playing games with her at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's kind of one of the main things that alerted James. So then he came in and obviously was able to immediately start CPR. So I think James is one of those people where his instincts kick in quite quickly. So I think, yeah, you just did just straight away kind of crack on with the CPR. So I think I got that very quickly. And obviously with kind of doing it forcefully, probably goes against human nature, really, I suppose, to kind of hurt your other half or whoever, really. But actually by him doing that meant that that oxygen was getting to my brain, because it was for a long time. We live in a rural area, and the air ambulance wasn't another call. So it did take that time for the ambulance to get there. And actually like 3 or 4 ambulances all arrived at the same time, which is obviously all the ways away. But they got there as quick as they could. And yeah, so James's kind of forcefulness in the CPR has meant that I've made kind of a full recovery, really, with a few kind of a few side effects, really, but nothing major or kind of, yeah.
Emily, is this common? Is this something you hear of a lot?
Yeah, so people are very reluctant to perform CPR because, as we just discussed, they're more concerned about causing harm and than good. And actually, the worst thing you can do if somebody's in cardiac arrest is to do nothing. So, with over 30,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrests every year and less than 1 in 10 people surviving, it really brings it home how scary that stat is. And if you do early CPR and early defib, you're going to double their chance of survival, just like with what James did. And that's why we really want to encourage people to look up Learn CPR Today, look at our Reviver tool, which is free. You just need a tablet or a phone and a cushion. And it's that simple. You can learn CPR. It will assess your compressions. It will explain calling an ambulance first, the compressions part of it, and also getting somebody to get a defib, and also explains that part of it as well in a really straightforward, accessible way to take the fear away. I mean, James is incredibly brave, but for a lot of people, the fear is what holds them back. And if you had the training, you'd have that confidence. And in the moment, you don't have the fear because you just know what to do and you instinctively just react. And that's what more and more people to do. You're 8 in 10 sadly, cardiac arrest happen in the home. So it's actually more likely that you're going to witness a cardiac arrest of a loved one. And that's why we're incentivizing people to look up Heart Month, look up Reviver, and do the training.
So it's funny the timing with this, because literally I think it was last week or maybe the week before, my wife was talking to me about this. I think she'd heard a story about somebody, I think the parent had a heart attack and there was no other parent around, and it was on the children. And my wife mentioned to me about it, and I said, like I said earlier, I said, well, I've done lots of first aid courses, and I've never had to give CPR, but I'm pretty confident that if I had to, I think I'd be okay. And my wife, as she says, she's never taken a course, but she again thinks she's seen enough that she would know what to do. And then she raised a very good point of, well, what if one of us isn't here and it's us that drops down and it's just our children? Would our children know what to do? And we both had the point of, they probably wouldn't. Other than calling 999, which, we teach them, they probably wouldn't know what to do.
So it's quite interesting if I can just say something. So Arabella's 8 now, and she goes to Brownies, and actually they've been doing CPR through Brownies. They've also obviously been taught how to kind of alert another adult and things as well. But I think it's really good, even from a young age. I'm not sure how effective, obviously, an 8-year-old is going to be at giving CPR, but even from that age, they're learning the kind of rhythm and what they have to do as they kind of get older.
But I think, like you say, depending on, regardless of how effective they are or aren't, if it's something you're taught from an early age, this sticks with you from life. Because I know that throughout the years it's changed, hasn't it, with the breaths and the pumps and everything else like that. It's changed, and they're now saying just concentrate on the pumps.
Yes, so we focus on compression only CPR, because it's as effective, and it's more straightforward for people to learn that skill. And it's interesting you talk about children. It's actually part of the national curriculum now, so children are learning it from an earlier age, which is fantastic, and it's something the British Heart Foundation actually pushed for. But it is something that, obviously, the more people know it, the more lifesavers there are, the more people have that confidence. And it's just incredible thinking how many lives could be saved if everyone had that confidence behind them.
What are the stats like with the survival rates with regards to somebody administering CPR almost immediately? I'm sorry to put you on the spot with that one if you know or don't know.
I know that I said about the doubling the chance of survival, but I'm, in terms of, we know that if you do nothing, then the outcome will be death. And so therefore, it is always better to do something than to do nothing. And if people forget everything else that they've heard about this, that is the kind of call to action. Because imagine if you could have learned something so easily in 15 minutes, giving yourself that confidence, taking that fear away. Because from my own experience, when you're in that moment, you just do it. as exactly what James did, whether you have the background training or not. And so people kind of have to have that in mind, but even better if you have that knowledge as well. It's really important.
Sarah, James, has this changed your outlook on first aid courses and this type of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you're surprised that you never learn, aren't you?
Yeah.
James is
Yeah.
a big sports player, part of football teams and kind of growing up, and now part of a vet's football team. So I think you're kind of surprised that you actually never did that training.
Yeah, I think so, but I think I'd also say now that actually it isn't as complex as having to book into a course and taking half a day off work or anything like that. The online training is really, really good and very interactive. So it isn't a burden to do it. It's just do that instead of watching TV for 15 minutes. And again, the benefit that can deliver could be absolutely huge. So.
Yeah, 100% agree. Emily, if people want to find out a little bit more information, maybe book onto a spot somewhere, where's the best place for them to go and do that?
So anyone can do it anytime. You don't have to book a spot. You just Google Learn CPR today, or you Google Heart Month British Heart Foundation, and Revival will pop up, and anyone can sign up whenever they want to. It's available whenever you want it. And that's the great thing as well, that you can do it as many times as you want, which is fantastic, because even with people who are competent and very well trained in CPR, you still should be doing it at least once or twice a year. So
there you go. I 100% agree, and I know what my kids are going to be doing this weekend now. But if it's 15 minutes and it saves somebody's life, it's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Emily, Sarah, James, thank you so much for talking to me. I really do appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.